Okay. And I know I'm crazy, but to me, I think a lot of teachers, when they teach 101 to students, they get an essay about, like, I don't know, drug legalization or whatever, and then they have students write about that. And I think that's a perfectly fine idea. If your teachers are doing that, it doesn't bother me. Um, it's just, what I think is fascinating about Plato is to watch Plato discussing and doing the same skills I'm asking you to do. He's really thinking about what writing is and how it works. So just as I was saying that you should listen and then speak if you're at a party, and also if you see, now I'm repeating myself like Socrates accused Lysias of doing. But this idea, I think it's a really important concept that Socrates hears something he doesn't agree with, but then he gives a whole speech on the same subject just to show that he can before moving on to his opinion. It's very similar to what I would ask you to do. And if you look at the considering objections portion of the handout, it involves imagining what your opponent would say, right? So just right here, you can see it under considering objections. Start a paragraph with, it's not focusing. Okay, focus. What's wrong? Start a paragraph with, some people may object to my opinion, they may say. This is Socrates doing that, right? I'm going to tell you a little preview, which is Socrates thinks love is awesome. He thinks love is great. But he wants to start off by thinking about someone that disagreed with him. What would they say? Now, he heard Lysias say a bunch of stuff, but he felt like that wasn't even a very good argument. So he wants to make that better before disagreeing with it. It's a strange idea, but I hope you can see this is a way of building a paper. It's a way of building writing in college, to sort of figure out what the other person would say. Students are always stumped about how to write more pages, because what they think writing is I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this. But actually, writing is, here's what someone else said. Here's what they meant by it. Here's what they were thinking. Here are some examples I'm going to use to make what they said better, and I want to disagree with all of this and say why it's wrong. And that's how you get those long essays. If you've ever struggled to write, this is how real writing gets done. A lot of your time in writing is spent summarizing other people's material and showing that you understand it, and that you can that you can imagine where they are coming from and why they would say things like that. Then you get to your opinion. That's how you do it. Um, it's why so much of high school involves summarizing. Teachers are not wrong to teach you this. That is the first step. But for a lot of people, especially people that don't go to college, that's the only step. They're just like, well, that's what that guy said. I guess it's true. But there's more to it than that. You figure out what they said, you understand it, you repeat it, then it's your turn to move. So right now, Socrates is still in the repeating things phase. So let's take a look at what he says. This is his speech about love. He starts by sort of praying to the gods to help him with this speech. Come, O ye muses. The muses are sort of they're like the ancient Greek gods that inspire the arts, like history and music and these kinds of things, and speech making. Come, O ye muses, melodious as ye are called, whether you have received this name from the character of your strains, or because the Melians are a musical race, help, oh help me in the tale which my good friend here desires me to rehearse, in order that his friend, whom he always deemed wise, may seem to him to be wiser than ever. He's just saying, hey gods, help me out with this so Phaedrus doesn't think I'm an idiot. Once upon a time, there was a fair boy, or more properly speaking, a youth. He was very fair, meaning very beautiful, and had a great many lovers. People loved him. But there was a special cunning one who had persuaded the youth that he did not love him, but that he really loved him all the same. And one day, when he was paying addresses to him, used this very argument, that he ought to accept the non-lover rather than the lover. These words were as follows. So again, this is not surprising. We didn't spend time on this. The point is that this is the argument, the same argument Lysias made, that he ought to accept the non-lover. You ought to accept, in a romantic relationship, somebody that doesn't love you rather than someone does. His words were as follows. This is what he said. Socrates is being a little silly here. Notice what he's doing is, when it's his turn to give a speech, he says, imagine a young person would say this, blah, 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 blah. Do you see how he's not saying, I believe? He has to imagine a character who would say this, because Socrates himself doesn't actually believe this. So his speech is like, how do I put this? You know how Plato wrote the Phaedrus, and then in the Phaedrus, he has the characters read a speech by Lysias? When it's Socrates' turn to give a speech, he creates a story where there's a young person and someone wants to be in a romantic relationship with them, and he is going to, so he says, here's what that person said. So it's the same kind of thing that Plato's doing. Plato wants to make an argument, but he puts fictional characters giving speeches in it. Socrates, when it's his turn to talk, creates a little fictional story where somebody gets to give speeches in it. So I hope you can see this little section, this little page with Socrates on it, is a kind of mirror image of the whole book we're currently reading, in which instead of just saying, I believe this, he creates fictional characters who speak for him. Why? Well, in Socrates' case, it's because he doesn't really believe this speech, so he wants to give it to somebody else to say. So here is the speech. All good counsel begins in the same way. A man should know what he is advising about, or his counsel will all come to naught. Meaning, if someone's giving advice, they better know what they're talking about, or his counsel, his advice, will all come to naught, will be nothing. So the person giving advice better know what the hell they're talking about, or it's going to be worthless. This is something we'll be talking about a lot in this class, which is that if you're going to quote people, they better be experts. You better be discussing people who know what they are doing. The reason we're talking about Plato is he is a philosopher who has mattered to people for 2,500 years. So that's pretty reliable. So this is, again, Socrates wants to make sure, he says, let's make sure we're talking to people who know what they're doing. All right. And here he says, but people imagine they know about the nature of things when they don't know about them. And, not having come to an understanding at first because they think they know, they end, as might be expected, contradicting one another and themselves. Now, you and I must not be guilty of this fundamental error which we condemn in others. That's fascinating to me, because what he's talking about in that sentence feels like conspiracy theories. People think they know things, but they don't know things, and then they end up contradicting themselves and making a mess. And there's a million conspiracy theories we could talk about. But like, people will say, I should be, I'm free. America's a free country, and I should be free not to wear a mask. Okay, but then they want to go in a restaurant, and the restaurant says, well, you are going to have to put a mask on to come in this restaurant. And they go, this is a violation of my freedom. But they haven't really thought about it, because what about the restaurant's freedom? Isn't the restaurant people free to wear masks? Isn't the restaurant free to turn away customers who don't wear masks? It's not just freedom for you, right? It's crazy to say, my freedom means I don't have to wear a mask. And then you go in a restaurant, and the restaurant says, you have to wear a mask in our restaurant. He says, that's not free. Well, how is it how is the restaurant should have a say about whether people are going to be healthy and safe in their restaurant. What about their workers? Got to protect their workers. So you end up contradicting yourself and causing all of these problems. And people believe in conspiracy theories. They believe in one crazy thing, like the earth is flat, and then they end up believing a pile of crazy things, like vaccines cause autism, or cell phone towers cause COVID, or, the birds are all robots, or whatever crazy thing people believe. And Socrates says, you got to talk to experts. We got to make sure we're talking to trustworthy people who know what we're doing, or we're going to fall into crazy habits. Plato helps teach you how to think. He tries to make things sort of clear. I think it's a pretty useful thing. Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. So like, here's another simple example. If a person says, listen, I don't want to wear a mask because it's my personal choice about whether to have health safety, and now I'm going to go in this restaurant, can the cooks be like, you know what? It's my personal decision about whether what degree temperature I'm going to cook this chicken to. So maybe I'm just going to cook the chicken to 45 degrees and give it to you raw, and you can just die of, food poisoning or whatever, because I gave you raw chicken, because it's my personal freedom to cook this chicken as much as I want. Or if it's your freedom not to wear a mask, do the chefs have the freedom not to wash their hands when they're cooking? That's the kind of contradictions Plato says that you fall into if you don't talk to experts. All right, pick it up in the next video.